I ran my short film concept through the project intelligence this week. Project feasibility, festival potential, and online reach. One of those scores came back lower than I wanted, and it changed how I have to build the story. Before I show you the results, I want to explain what this actually is, because it's not magic. Project intelligence doesn't tell you if your film is good. It tells you if your idea is clear enough to work. It looks at whether the concept is actually feasible, whether the short has strong festival DNA, whether it has real online reach, and whether the audience is defined clearly enough for the story to travel. A low score doesn't mean the idea is bad. It means something in the concept still needs to be solved. And if I ignore that now, I'll pay for it later in the script. The overall grade came back as an A-, which is better than I ever got in school. Feasibility was 95%, festival potential was 80, and online reach was a 75. Which was lower than I really want. So overall, the project is strong, but the online reach score is telling me something important. And that's really the first thing I want to focus on. This is a very feasible film. The tool is saying the project is contained, manageable, and realistic to produce. The single location setup keeps the logistics simple, the cast is minimal, and the whole thing feels built for a short film runtime. That's a good sign, because it means I'm not forcing this story to be something it isn't. The festival potential score is also encouraging. And 80% means this fits a lane festivals already understand. Something emotionally driven, high stakes, visually distinct enough to stand out. That matters because I'm not just trying to make something creepy.
Come here, my dear boy.
I want to make something that feels considered, focused, and memorable. The online reach score is the one I'm paying the most attention to. 75% is not bad, but it's lower than I really wanted. And the tool is basically telling me the story needs to move away from the generic zombie language and lead harder in the body horror and psychological horror. That makes sense, because the strongest idea here is not just the infection, it's the bodily autonomy, caretaking, and the horror of loving someone you can't save. If I don't fix that now, I'm building a film with a ceiling. And that's the part that most people skip. They go straight to writing, like I did. But this is where you either build something that travels or something that stays stuck in the mud. What the project intelligence results are telling me overall is the story already has strong bones. It has a clear, contained setup, it's manageable to produce, and it has real festival potential. But I need to be more specific about the horror language, more grounded in the emotional conflict, and more intentional about how the body horror shows up visually and sonically. That means if I don't have the budget, I shouldn't try to make it into something bigger than it is. I need to keep it real, keep it grounded, and work with what the story actually is. That small adjustment at the concept level could completely change how this film works. After seeing that, I moved to the story builder to stress test the idea a little bit further. This is where the concept either deepens or falls apart. The strongest thing it identified is the glass joint body horror mechanic. That gives the infected a unique visual and auditory identity, and it's probably the clearest thing that makes this film stand apart. It also pointed out that the thematic focus on caretaking and the limits of love, which is really the emotional core of the whole project. That's what makes this more than just a horror concept. It gives the story real emotional weight. It also reinforced that the single location setting is one of the biggest strengths, because it keeps production feasible while making the whole thing feel trapped and claustrophobic. That's actually something I want to lean into more now, because the setting itself can be part of the horror. But it also flagged a few points I need to address. The biggest one is that the source of the blood is currently vague. and that weakens the immediate stakes. I need to decide whether the blood is Walker's, someone else's, or tied to some other specific source. Because once I know that, the physical and moral toll become much more clear. It also pointed out that I need a real ticking clock. Survival on its own is not enough for a short film. I need a specific escalation, something like the wife's arm beginning to fuse permanently. So there's a true now or never moment driving the climax. Another note was that the sound of the hardening joints needs to be built into the script as part of the horror. That's important because the world should not just be visually disturbing, it should be physically and sonically unbearable. It also said I need to clarify Walker's role before the collapse so the audience understands why he's capable of maintaining his home hospital environment. That matters because if the story is about caretaking, then his past should help explain why he knows how to keep people alive, even if he's failing at everything emotionally. The story builder also gave me some refinement ideas I actually think are strong. One was to lean into the irony of the vaccine. Maybe Walker was the one who insisted the family get it, which would make his grief feel like direct responsibility instead of just loss. That adds a much stronger emotional burden. Another was to use the dried joints as a literal obstacle, like a character being trapped in a doorway or unable to move without risking shattering their own body. That's a great idea because it turns the horror into something kinetic instead of just atmosphere. It also suggested including one ritual of normalcy. Something like Walker trying to read a story to a child who is twitching in pain. That kind of moment would make the tragedy hit harder because it shows him clinging to something human inside something unbearable. The glass progression idea is also smart. Starting with a slight crystallization in the eyes or the skin would let the disease develop in stages instead of just appearing all at once. That would make the decay feel more physical and more tragic. And the false hope element is strong too. A radio broadcast, a half-empty medical kit, something Walker clings to even though it's probably already too late. That gives the story a more devastating emotional arc when the truth actually lands. What I'm taking from all this, the story works best when the horror is personal, tactile, and morally uncomfortable. The online reach note is also important because if I frame this as a social horror story about bodily autonomy, that gives people something to talk about. It becomes more than a monster story. It becomes about control, caregiving, grief, and the body as a prison. So here is where the story stands at the end of day 7. The core idea is still intact, but now I can make it more focused, more intentional, more grounded, more cerebral. And that came directly from the analysis. The biggest change is that I need to keep the story rooted in the emotional and bodily horror of what this family is going through. Instead of drifting into generic infected language, the glass joint mechanic, the sound design, the caretaking dynamic, and the tragedy of Walker's responsibility are what makes the story worth telling. There is still one note I'm sitting with, and that's whether Walker becomes too passive if I don't give him a stronger emotional turn. That might change how I structure this entire story. But that's what the beat board is for. Scene by scene, no guessing. That's where the story either locks in or shatters. Day 7 is done. Well, I guess it's actually day 8 because life happened. obviously. And it's crazy to think that we're 7% done with this challenge, because it still feels like there's so much work ahead of us. And that's exactly why I'm not jumping straight into the rewrite. 1 week score at the concept level can limit the entire film. I'd rather sit with that now than to have to rewrite it later. That's the point of doing this in order instead of going straight from idea to camera. Subscribe for the full video series, like and follow BCreativStudios for shorter updates. Day 14 is next, the beat board.